Welcome to the Book Show, a celebration of reading and writers. I'm Joe Donahue. American literary icon and best-selling author of The Things They Carry, Tim O'Brien, joins us this week to discuss his first new novel in 2 decades. America Fantastica is a propulsive caper of a book, beginning with a harebrained bank robbery, followed by a madcap cross-country chase, abundant with O'Brien's commentary on the state of American politics and culture. At the heart of the novel, amid a teeming cast of characters, readers will delight in the tug-of-war between two memorable human beings, the exuberant savior of souls, Angie Bing, and the compulsive liar that is Boyd Halverson. Tim O'Brien received the National Book Award and was a Pulitzer finalist. The Things They Carried was named a New York Times Book of the Century. He was also awarded the Pritzker Literature Award for Lifetime Achievement in Military Writing. Again, the new novel is America Fantastica, and it is a pleasure to welcome Tim O'Brien to this week's book show. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me on.
It's a great pleasure to have you on the program. I thought it was, I don't know if you feel this way, but it seems like this is unlike nothing you have really written before.
Yeah, it is. It partly why I wrote the book. I wanted to stretch my writing muscles and do something that I really had never done before. Most of my other books, in fact, all of my other books are in one way or another related to my own life, my own personality. And this one isn't. I'm writing about a cast of characters that I'm not only not familiar with, I'm not too delighted with at the same time. It's a group of kind of low-life people who are not middle class as I am, are not educated as I am, and whose ideologies and beliefs about the world I don't subscribe to. That was the fun of the book, trying to write a book that was entertaining and I think funny in parts, but about people that to me were strangers and I wanted to get to know.
Give us a sense of, because it seems this way, that it was very much an opportunity for you also for satire as well as commentary on the current state of our world.
Yeah, it was a tightrope walk between trying to write a story that I hope would entertain readers, but on the other hand, be about the world that we've all lived in for the last 10 years or so, a world where a kind of lying contagion has seemed to have infected our country, at least to an extent, that collided with another contagion, which was COVID. So it takes place in the year 2019 through the year 2020. It begins, as you said, with a strange bank robbery. A bank is robbed by what my main character, Boyd Halverson, but it's a bank that doesn't mind being robbed because it's been robbing itself for decades. Doesn't want to call in auditors, so doesn't report the robbery. And so it's a road trip across America, two characters on the run who aren't being really pursued by the bank in the first place. It is a satire. When I was in college, I had read Letters from the Earth by Mark Twain, and I'd read Jonathan Swift's, A Modest Proposal, both satires, both funny, but also full of anger about hypocrisy and deceit and overblown piety.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to write a book that was in the kind of entertainment wrapped around seriousness.
And there is this very fine line between reality and fantasy, or the term you use in the book, which I'm going to give you credit for creating, and I don't know whether you did or not, is mythomania.
I didn't create it. It's a real psychological, many people have asked me that. It's a real psychologist syndrome. It's also called pseudologia fantastica, hence the title of my book, America Fantastica. What it means is pathological lying. It's a rare disease that in our time doesn't seem quite so rare anymore. It seems, as I said earlier, kind of infectious. It's not a book about politics per se. It's not about Republicans and conservatives. It's about the culture of America more than anything. And it's about my own response, I suppose, to that culture. When I get on the telephone and call AT&T or any other large corporation, airlines, my banks, I get the same message over and over again, which is our phone lines are unusually busy. Please enjoy the flute music. And then for the next 45 minutes, I enjoy the flute music, waiting to talk to somebody about an airline ticket or my bank balance. And it occurred to me that this is a lie. It's a recorded message. Hence, the word unusually isn't right. Their lines are always busy. You get that message every time you call the bank. It's a recorded message. They aren't monitoring their phone lines. It comes on automatically. I don't know how many other Americans are disturbed by this, but it's gotten to me over the years. I end up talking to the telephone, basically no one there except I'm being recorded, saying, "Come on, tell the truth. Your lines aren't unusually busy." So it's things like this that aren't political, really, in the least. They have to do with the country that we're all living in.
Well, part of that country that we're all living in is, and you make this point in the book, is that what may be true on this Friday may not be true on Tuesday.
That's right. People fall out of love. It can happen fast. It can happen slowly. People change their minds. Scientists have changed their minds over the centuries. The Earth is no longer the center of our solar system. That was once true. We now know through science it's not true. So what was once true isn't now. And this issue of what's true and what's false has been with me ever since Vietnam, ever since the things they carried. When I began wondering in Vietnam what was the truth, even about myself, I had thought of myself as a nice, polite, kind, unviolent human being, and found myself in Vietnam. None of those. I was told to kill people, and I did my best. Scared out of my mind, but nonetheless pulling the trigger. So the person I thought I had been back in my high school and college years turned out to be somebody quite different a few months after graduating from college. So this issue of what is true and what is false has nagged me through many books, through my first 5, 6, 7 books. I've written about it in different kinds of ways.
In the case you just mentioned, though, it's less a lie and more the situation that you're put in and what is called on you for you to do. And we could discuss obviously the necessity or the non-necessity of that, but it's still the situation you were put in.
Oh, yeah, it was. The problem with me was I thought the truth was I would respond by saying no to war, no to pulling the trigger, and I didn't. So what I had thought was true about myself, that I was incapable of killing people, turned out not to be true thought. I came back from the war, became the person I'd once been in most ways. I'm not a violent guy. I'm not out to hurt people. Yet at one point in my life, I had been. So I questioned personally, what kind of person is Tim O'Brien? And what's the truth about Tim O'Brien? And the truth, I guess, in the end is I'm mutable, I'm fluid, I change with circumstance, as you just pointed out, as I suppose we all are. I think we all discover things about ourselves that we thought at one point were simply impossible or at least improbable.
Tim O'Brien is our guest on this week's book show. The name of the novel is America Fantastica, and it is published by Mariner. Did you come back as this other version of yourself and you return to the Tim O'Brien you thought you were? Was there guilt associated with that?
There was. It's the guilt of waking up at 2 a.m. and remembering an event, 3 silhouettes passing by 20 yards away in the dark, and pulling the trigger. And an hour later, when dawn broke, finding one dead human being out there, a kid of about 16 or 15 years old, and wondering if my bullet was the bullet that killed that kid. I'll never know. 30 or 40 of us were pulling the triggers. But in the end, I have to take responsibility for that death. I did pull the trigger. I was a soldier, and there was a dead kid lying there afterward. I think most soldiers, it's not a political issue, it's not a patriotic issue. It's an issue of just how you feel at 3 a.m. and there's a dead human being lying on the ground, and you ask yourself, did I do it? And in the end, whether my bullet literally hit the kid or not is irrelevant. I fired, and there's a dead person there. The word enemy in Vietnam doesn't mean the same thing that it means to me today. Back then, the word enemy simply meant it wasn't political, it wasn't communist and things like that. It was somebody trying to kill me, was what the word enemy meant. And I wanted to kill back to stay alive. For most people in America who weren't in a war, that word did have political connotations. But in the war itself, had nothing to do with politics. You don't go into a war and march through rice paddies and up into the mountains with each step almost being dead or worried about being dead. Politics is not talked about, it's not thought about, it's staying alive, hoping not to kill anybody while you're doing it.
You write in the book, we mentioned mythomania, which you also write about COVID in the book. It's interesting because both are killers, right?
Absolutely. Lying, pathological lying, kills the soul and the spirit. It betrays people and even betrays oneself, the utterance of lies. COVID kills in a more literal kind of way, 1 million dead Americans. And yet lies were being told about COVID. It's a hoax, doesn't exist, it's not real. Forget it, ease off. That was early on in the COVID epidemic. And then later on, other lies were substituted for it once all the people began dying around the world. Then it became a Chinese weapon that had been literally invented, and that was all over the internet, especially the dark parts of the internet, conspiracy theories about its origins, that it had been weaponized, the virus. So it's living in a strange Alice in Wonderland world where a virus is killing people, and yet other people are calling the virus a hoax. And if that doesn't cut muster, then make up a new conspiracy theory that it's a virus that's been weaponized. Things like that, Joe, are all over the internet. And part of writing this book was to dive into the rabbit hole of Alice in Wonderland and go onto the dark side of the internet and read what people are writing, and I think believing.
That idea of believing, I mean, comes to us with Boyd Halverson. This is a very interesting character. We realize he seems not as complex in the first several pages as he does as the novel takes root and continues to grow, but becomes a very complex character dealing with these issues of his own falsehoods.
Yeah, he's been lying as a character since he was very young. He had grown up in Santa Monica on the wrong side of some really fast Hollywood tracks, a paperboy to the stars, feeling inferior, living in a small bungalow while delivering papers to mansions of very famous people, living in a household where his father didn't seem to love him, and his mother paid very little attention to him. And he began making up stories about his own family. His father no longer sold used cars. Instead, he's a jet fighter pilot and an astronaut. And his mother isn't just a woman eating chocolate-covered candies on the sofa till she weighs 400 pounds. She's instead a producer for a Hollywood studio. Kind of small kid lies about your own family. You could call it, I suppose, on the one hand, an inferiority complex that he starts with. It begins this lying disease he suffers from. In the end, he's one of these people I just talked about, a conspiracy guy writing on the internet. His whole life has fallen apart once he has been discovered as a liar, a man who's made up resumes to get jobs as a journalist and so on. He lies about everything: his age, his height, his weight, where he went to college, you name it. This man lies about it compulsively and pathologically. At the same time, I feel sympathy for him, or at least empathy, that I feel for this guy who's brokenhearted about his life and is trying to salvage his life through making up a new reality through the fantasy of lying. Lots of people do it. There's a syndrome called stolen valor, in which people who didn't serve in Vietnam, very famous people in some cases, lied about it. A professor at an Ivy League college, a famous actor. And I feel for them that they felt they had to invent a reality and lie about, invent a new reality and lie about the old one.
We seem to look in our politics, and we're being often told lies, and lies that are referred to as the big lie. And yet there is even an understanding by many people that yes, okay, what this presidential candidate is saying is a lie, but we still are going to support him, and that doesn't matter. It takes a long time to get to that point, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's shocking that it's one thing to believe the person, to fault the person uttering the lie. It's another thing for 70 million people to either accept the lie, the election was stolen, it was a fraud. As we now know, people have either accepted it or, as you say, have somehow found other reasons to, I guess, excuse lying. That is not to say lying is new. It's as old as Africa. It's as old as Babylon. It's been with us in the Old Testament. It's not a new phenomenon. What does seem to me new is how much we seem to now forgive it. We forgive that tape recording we listen to when we call the airlines about the lines being unusually busy. So much so that we don't even, I suppose, even consider it a lie. We just consider it business as usual. And it's the business as usual aspect that frightens me, that we've come to accept it.
It's safe to say that my favorite character in this book is Angie, and it's a really neat character. This is a character who is larger than life, yes, but also is really interesting as she's telling this story about stealing a gymnastics trophy for no other purpose than to remind Boyd of how they first met. And it's really interesting because it has nothing to do with the trophy.
I fell in love with Angie. This book started 22 years ago. I wrote maybe 18 pages before my first son was born, a long, long time ago. But I was around Angie for those 10, 15 pages enough to fall in love with her. For the next 20 years, as I raised my son, as I stopped writing so I could be a good father, Angie was with me the whole time, saying, write about me, finish this book, put me in the book. I'm smart. I'm a missionary. I save souls. I've made something of myself. I fell for her. She was irrepressible. Among other things, she's a nonstop talker. As they're driving through midnight America, through Texas and Kansas and up to Minnesota and out to Las Vegas and up to Seattle, she doesn't stop talking. The story you mentioned about how she had first met Boyd, gymnastics has absolutely nothing to do with it. She's the kind of person who, in the course of saying how we met, reveals things about herself. Yeah, she's Pentecostal, and yes, she's a missionary, but she's also the kind of person who's going to steal somebody else's gymnastics trophy. Feeling a little guilt about it, but not enough to give the trophy back. She's a person who simply appoints fiancés She doesn't wait to be proposed to. She simply appoints them. She carries around three or four fiancés at all times and thinks nothing of it. Well, I wanted to learn more about her, and that's partly why I began writing the book again after those 20 years had passed. That I just wanted to get to know Angie better. She too is my favorite character in the book.
Tim O'Brien is our guest. The name of the new novel is America Fantastica. Boyd is a fascinating character too. Obviously, as we mentioned, a pathological liar, but that doesn't mean you're not sympathetic to this character. You seem sympathetic to this character.
I certainly am. I'm sympathetic to all of them, even the most low-life burglars and murderers and thieves. As I mentioned, I was writing about people other than myself. And in the world we live in, what I'm curious about and feel empathy for people who do things I don't approve of. Why do they do it? Some of them do it out of brokenheartedness. Some of them do it out of bad childhoods. Some of them do it because they feel that their life has gone badly. They feel dissed, dismissed, disappointed, all those disses. And in the end, reality for these people probably becomes a kind of monster. They can't tolerate it anymore. And so they find an alternative. And the alternative is to make up a new reality. Some call it lying. They probably believe it.
There's the character of Randy. Give us a sense of Randy, because you get into his head too. Randy has a great line, which is, "Why does everybody underestimate me except me?"
That's my favorite line in the book.
It's a great line.
He's a low life. He's a doofus. He's a rodeo cowboy, a burglar, and he's also one of Angie's fiancés. Again, appointed a fiancé. Writing about him was one of the great pleasures of the book. Writing about all the villains in the book was fun because I felt that I was investigating something about why people do the things they do. Yeah, they can sometimes be funny. They can other times be really nasty, as Randy is. I can laugh at some things he does until out of nowhere he does something really terrible. And then I'm not laughing anymore. The line, "Why does everybody underestimate me except me?" I can believe from that kind of a character. He feels that he is God's gift to mankind when he's pretty much exactly the opposite. And to write about a person like that is to write about contradictions in human personalities. It fascinates me about all the characters. There's a great line in a poem by Robert Graves called "The Devil's Advice to Storytellers." And the line is, "Nice contradiction between fact and fact makes the whole read human and exact." I believe that about not only characters in novels, but the people I encounter in my own life. I'm fascinated by people with contradictions. If I feel I've read somebody very clearly and know what they're about, I lose that sense of mystery about the human being that I really love and want to explore.
It seems like for you, Tim, it is all about the story. It's not about commentary. You're not making a message. You're telling a story, and these characters who are very funny and very surprising in many ways, not to mention your skill as a writer, come together to create a very powerful novel.
I appreciate that. And that was the goal. I'm not sure that I was after power so much as I was after whatever it was Mark Twain did in Letters from the Earth and Swift did in A Modest Proposal. I was after a kind of satire and humor, but I was also after looking at something that makes me yell at my TV set, CNN or the Fox News, that makes me go on the web and feel a kind of anger mixed with astonishment at the things I read on the web about the world that are pretty clearly false. Jackie Robinson was not black, he was a white man. That's on the internet. Reptiles man the phone banks at the IRS. I didn't make those two up. Some I did make up. It was fun to make up these conspiracy theory things, but some of them, I'd say half of them in the book, are taken from the real world. As strange and ludicrous and preposterous as they are.
I guess when I use the word power, it's because this book, in the introduction, I use the word propulsive. It is, you go at a really strong pace. It's fast paced and it's a joyride. It's a hell of a ride.
Yeah, the whole idea of the road trip was what probably organized the book for me. I pictured these two people, Angie and Boyd, having robbed a bank and carrying around $81,000, driving through nighttime America and listening to talk radio coming out of the car radio as they're driving through, the darkness of Montana or up to Seattle. And what kinds of things, the context of what was happening around them as they're on this road trip. A road trip through a new kind of America. Certainly hope this lying contagion passes, but is at least in the year 2019 and 2020, in those years, was with us. So I wanted to write a book about two people driving through, I guess, a kind of modern day Alice in Wonderland, where the world has gone upside down in so many ways. I was taught when I was a young kid that, you shouldn't tell lies, that it was a bad thing. I was taught it in Sunday school by my parents, and that it can be cripple your soul. To have it so accepted these days, to me, seems astonishing, as it does to, I hope, a reader of my book.
The new novel is America Fantastica. It is an amazing piece of work and just a terrific read, and I just think a very important, wise novel. Tim, thank you so much for being with us. It's a great pleasure to have you on the program.
It was a great pleasure, Joe. Thank you.
Again, the name of Tim's new novel is America Fantastica. It is published by Mariner Books. Thanks to our producer, Sarah LeDuc. Write to us at book@wamc.org. The latest on National Productions programs is available via the Airwaves newsletter at wamc.org and on social media at WAMC Radio. Bookmark us for next week, and thanks for listening. For The Book Show, I'm Joe Donahue.